So hello all, I'm here with my first educational video, and as I told earlier that I'll be starting with class 9 science. So I'm starting with class 9 biology over here, and the first chapter is called the fundamental unit of life, which is we'll be learning about the basic unit of life. So in this chapter, we learn about the discovery of cell. We learn about the brief history behind how we know what we know about cells. And we'll come to the definition about what cell actually is. We'll also look at a very simple experiment that you'll probably be doing inside your labs. And we'll be looking at it because it will help us to view cells in real time. We learn about the cell theory and unicellular and multicellular organisms, how they look, what are the differences and examples. And along with the diagrams, I'll also show you the microscopic views so that you can get the real-time picture of how these cells actually look inside our bodies or look in real life. Then we'll get a brief introduction about cell organelles. So that's about our class. So let's dive right in. So the earliest recorded discovery of a cell, which is the basic unit of life, was done by this man named Robert Hooke in 1665. He used a self-designed microscope. Look how beautiful it is. Yeah, so he used this microscope and took out a section of cork, which we usually see as it's used as a lid or a stopper in wine bottles or in oil bottles. So he used a section of this cork and he viewed it under this microscope in 1665. So what we need to know and remember over here is that cork is nothing but plant material. It is derived from the bark of a special tree which we loosely call as cork oak. So the bark is peeled off like this and processed into these cork. So the section basically looked like this under his microscope. So as you can see, there are little compartments inside it, and these little rooms look a lot like those in a honeycomb. See, they're so similar. So room in Latin is called as cell. So that's how Robert Hooke coined these little compartments or little rooms as cell. Now we'll see a simple experiment that you'll probably do in your lab as well, and it's called the onion peel experiment. And through this, as I already told, we can see the basic structure of cells in real time. So let's see what we do here. So here we take an onion, take out the first layer. Then with a pair of forceps, carefully peel out one single layer. This skin is called epidermis. So without tearing, take out one single layer. We first put it in water to moisten it. Then with a thin brush so that it's very delicate, so we don't want to break it. We put it inside the stain. Here saffron is used so that we can view the cells clearly. Then to avoid overstaining, once again we put it inside water. Take it out, put on a microscopic slide with a drop of glycerin, void drying, with the help of a needle, cover it with a cover slip. avoid air bubbles. Then blot out the extra glycerin, water, stain, the blotting paper. Then under the microscope, we get this. So you can see clearly that there are these brick-like rectangular shaped rooms, and these are nothing but the cells. And what else do you see? I mean, the boundaries are clearly marked, right? And what else do you see? Inside you see each one, you can find a darkly stained circle, right? And dots. So we'll also learn what those are. So this is the picture that you get inside an onion peel, the picture of so many cells lined up, right? Now we look at the important milestones in the discovery of cell. So as we already learned, in 1665, Robert Hooke, he coined the term cells after he observed them under the microscope. Now, in 1674, another scientist called Hooke, he discovered freely living cells in pond water. Now, we saw that in a tiny piece of an onion peel, there are so many cells. But Hooke observed that he observed single cells living freely in pond water. That means they can live on their own, some cells. Then in 1831, Robert Brown, he discovered the nucleus and learned more about it. So, nucleus is nothing but the small dots that we saw around the center, near the center of each cell. Remember in the onion peel? That's the nucleus. And in 1839, Purkinje, he coined the term protoplasm for the fluid inside cells. So, right now itself, we know by joining the puzzle pieces, we know a little bit about the cell already. So, first thing, that all living organisms are made up of cells. Second, some cells can live freely in water or live freely. Then third, that all cells have got nucleus, which is present. It's the densely stained part that is present near the center of each cell. Then all cells have a living fluid inside cells, and it's called protoplasm. Right? Now, in 1838 and 1839, two scientists independently named Schleiden and Schwann, they formulated a theory known as cell theory. In 1855, Virchow, he expanded the cell theory by adding his own point to it. Then in 1940, Vladimir Sorokin, he invented electron microscope. So with the invention of electron microscope, it was possible for the scientists of that era to study the complex structures inside the cell and its organelles. Now let's look at the cell theory that was formulated by Schleiden and Schwann. Now, originally it has got 2 points, and the third one was added to it by Virchow. So let's see the first point. All animals and plants are composed of cells. That means every living organisms have cells in them. Then second one, cells are the basic structural and functional unit of life. Now what does this mean? We'll look at it in detail in the next slide. Thirdly, all cells arise from pre-existing cells. That means every cell arises only from already existing cells. This was the point that was added to by Virchow. So what do you mean by cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life? Every living organism is made up of basic building blocks. That means just like a building is made up of single bricks structurally, every living organism is also made up of these basic building blocks called cells. So the structure of every living organism is composed of the basic blocks called cells. That's why it's the basic structural unit. Then functionally also, these cells perform all the functions that the living organism in itself functions. That means it respires, digestion happens inside it, transport of nutrients, excretion, reproduction, all these functions that are done by the living organisms, all living organisms are also done by its individual cells. That means it is living on its own inside and also communicating with other cells inside our bodies. So that means functionally also it is the basic unit of our bodies, of all living forms. So let's read that point. Each living cell has the capacity to do certain basic functions characteristic of all living forms. Some functions examples are respiration, digestion and transport of nutrients, excretion, reproduction, and in many cases even communication with neighbors. So hence, we can define cell as the basic structural and functional unit of life. Now, based on the number of cells inside an organism, they can be classified as broadly classified as unicellular and multicellular organisms. Now, from the name itself, we can make out what does it mean. Uni always means single. So, organisms that are made up of only one single cell that carries out all the functions are known as unicellular organisms. Examples for these are, few examples are amoeba, paramecium, euglena, yeast, diatoms, chlamydomonas. We'll look at some of them in the coming slides. Then multicellular organisms are multi as in many. So these animals they have many number of cells and also many different types of cells that carry out the functions needed by the organism. Now in multicellular organisms, obviously the functions become a little more complex and varied. So now there are functions like control and coordination, circulation, defense, and on top of all this on top of respiration, digestion, excretion, such processes. So examples for these, you can give the example of any large organism. So here I have given humans, cats, dogs, lotus plant, and ferns. These are some of the examples of unicellular organisms. So the first three are the bacteria, examples of bacteria that are unicellular. So first one is the E. coli. Now these are found inside our intestines. Many are harmless, some are beneficial, some are harmful and cause conditions like diarrhea. Then the streptococcus, these bacteria sometimes cause throat infections, etc. Then halobacteria, which are found in oceans, and some of them are also used in food as food dye. It's used in that. Then because they have pigments. Then secondly, all protists are unicellular. Now, examples are amoeba, euglena, paramecium that have been shown here. Amoeba is irregular shaped, as you can see. Paramecium is classic slipper shape. Then some algae. Algae are nothing but the plants like organisms that you see inside ponds, etc. and in moist places. That makes it slippery. So some algae are unicellular like chlorella and chlamydomonas. Then Saccharomyces or yeast. They are fungi which are unicellular and they are also found in our body. Sometimes they cause diseases, sometimes they are harmless. Then coming to multicellular organisms, the classic example is our body itself. So inside human body, there are many types of cells, like so many types of cells. So some of them are shown here. The first is an osteocyte, the pink color one, that is the diagram. So it's an osteocyte, that is a bone cell, and the microscopic structure is given beneath it, the black and white structure of an osteocyte. Then the second one is a nerve cell or neuron, and you can see the real-time microscopic picture beneath the diagram. So the third one is adipocyte, that is fat cell, and the again microscopic picture you can see beneath the diagram. So you can see they've got peculiar structures. Now these are related to their function, how these bone cells and nerve cells have got hair-like parts in them. So these parts help them to communicate with nearby cells. And like you see in our nervous system, these nerves communicate, they send messages to and from our body in lightning speed. That's how we are able to move and pick up objects or speak, think. So these hair-like structures help them to make networks and communicate with each other and pass messages or signals. And you see here the fat cell has got a large vacuole, sac-like structures which helps them to store fats. So all this shows us that the structures of different types of cell are actually related to their function. These are some other examples. First one is smooth muscle cells. Second one is just a couple of types of cells inside our blood, the red blood cell and the white blood cell. And this is where it all starts. First picture is that of the ovum under the microscope, the egg cell, and the second one of the sperms. Now this was basically about the structure. Now coming to the function of cells, before we get into the function of cells, let's just look at the example of our school itself. So how does your school function? Like beside teaching you, a school has different other functions like getting you admitted, making rules for everybody and decision making and supply, managing the school supplies and so many other functions, transporting, etc. So all these functions are carried out by different groups of people. So there's the management, which and the principal, which are who are the major decision makers. Then there's the administration, the teachers, of course, and the parents, students. Okay, no students, no school. Then there are the janitors and other staff, which help to keep your school clean, the gardens watered. Right, so what is happening here? The huge number of functions, different variety of functions of the school is being divided between all these experts. So this whole process also is called as division of labor. So this is also present in our cells because even every single individual cell, as we already saw, have got their own functions. And all these involves basic steps like making of new materials, storing them, transporting them, clearing the waste from all these processes. And all these functions are actually divided between specific components inside the cell. So inside cell also there are specific parts and they are called cell organelles. And an interesting fact here is that all cells of all organisms, we saw there are so many different types of cells. We already know there are so many different types of organisms. Now, regardless of all this, every living cell on planet Earth have got the same set of cell organelles. So, our cell and let's say a tiger cell have got the same set of cell organelles. So, about that we learn in our next class. So let's just quickly review what all we learned. First of all, we learned who discovered cell, when and why he called it a cell. Right? So Robert Hooke in 1665, he observed the cork slice and he saw that there are rooms like those in honeycomb and called them cell, which means room in Latin. Then we looked at the onion peel, classic onion peel experiment and saw how cells look under the microscope. Then we saw the brief history behind the story that we know about cells right now. And we learned about the cell theory that was formulated by Schleiden and Schwann. And it says nothing but all living organisms are made of cells. They are the structural and functional unit of life itself. And all cells arise from already existing cells, which was added by Virchow. Then we learnt about uni and multicellular organisms. We looked at different types of cells, we looked at different examples of both these types of organisms, and we got a basic intro about the significance of cell organelles. So in the next class, we learn about the different cell organelles. We'll get into that. Okay, so for now only this much. So thank you everyone, and stay tuned for more. Please subscribe, spread the word among your friends and teachers, and like this video, share my work. Thanks a lot. See you.